After the Cavalry reforms of the 4th century BC, the Roman army of the 3rd century BC had gone through a drastic change since the 4th century BC. This is possibly due to the many conflicts that Rome had faced during the 4th century BC, such as the wars with the Samnites, Etruscans, Greek city-states, Italians, and Latin tribes. Because of these conflicts with their neighbors, it is highly believed that the Roman military changed by the 3rd century BC, possibly into a more practical design compared to the earlier century. In such, the military system of the Roman units in the 4th century BC had either been incorporated into new units or were outright removed entirely. An example of this is with the leves, ascensi, and rorii, in which could have been incorporated into other military units, as the leves and ascensi would have been formed and mashed together that would make the Roman velites, while the rorii would have been incorporated into the hastati. In fact, in the 3rd century BC, the arms and armor of the Roman army changed entirely from the previous century. In the 3rd century BC, the Roman cavalry had incredibly changed over a century since the 4th century BC, in which this military unit had gone from the wearing of bronze-style armor to the majority of them wearing almost no style of bronze armor at all. In fact, leg armor had been removed entirely. Instead of wearing bronze chest armor, they were known to now be wearing the lorica. Wool tunics would actually be worn instead of the Mediterranean light tunics, possibly to add a little more protection, but it is unknown. These came in a variety of colors, as no uniform style of tunic was actually worn. Footwear would be of an everyday style design, possibly because one, this was very commonly used. This would change by the 2nd or 1st century BC. Wool jerkins would be worn underneath the said mail armor, possibly to actually provide a form of cushioning. Of how much is little known. By the 3rd century BC, the Roman army had started to acquire the infamous lorica hamata. This was known to be the infamous style of armor used by the Celts. It is believed that the Romans acquired this mainly due to fighting against the Celts in northern Italy. This style of armor actually comes in multiple designs and forms. In fact, it does depend on the legion on how the doublet of the hamata is actually placed on. So it does depend on the user. Some in which actually had a variation of style of brass or bronze button, as it would, to hold the mail doublet in place. This armor in general was actually perfect to stopping cutting and thrusting blows. Typically, a leather belt would be worn as an everyday design. These are actually indicated to have had a form of designs, shapes, and symbols on them, possibly sewn into the fabric to indicate of their family and household. The gladius delos would be the common Roman sword of the Roman cavalry from the said 4th century BC all the way leading up to the said 1st century BC or the 1st century AD. But there is typically a lot of information that proves otherwise. The helmets of the said Roman cavalry units would actually be identical almost to that of the centurions, such as that with a mix of Italian Corinthian, Thracian, Greek, Macedonian, or even the Montetifino design helmet. But it did depend on the user. In the 3rd century BC, the Roman cavalry would even use a form of round shield. This would be highly used until sometime around the 1st century BC. Possibly because one, it was cheaper to manufacture and easier to use on the form of cavalry-style warfare. The Roman cavalry at this point would also use bundles of javelins. However, the javelins by this point in time were incredibly highly used in huge quantities.
чорну, що над